Welcome to Our Journey to Christ podcast with your hosts, Nikki Cottom and Katie Spencer. Join them as they discuss difficult conversations, hope, joy, identity, expansion, faith, trust, belonging, and healing. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to have Katie here with me again today. How are you, Katie?
I'm good, Nikki. It's so good to be back and to start this, and let's talk today. Let's share. Have everyone come and join us as we visit today.
Yes, welcome. Welcome to everybody who's watching. This is going to be a fun discussion today where we want to talk about identity. Because in our intro, we talked a little bit about why it's important to have an awareness of identity that we actually embody, oftentimes without knowing it, but we don't always know what it is, right? It's like people might pick up on stuff about us that we think, oh, maybe that's who I am, or maybe that's something that I'm really good at. But we don't quite nail it on the head, oftentimes, what exactly those identities are. And we oftentimes, as we grow up and as we go through phases of life, we'll receive compliments or we'll receive labels that we may not like. Maybe we do like some, maybe we have an attachment to them, but they might not actually be something we're born to be successful with. And I know that God programs all of us for success, that just like an acorn is destined to be a mighty oak when planted, not a corn plant, right? So we are all programmed with this beautiful divine identity from God, and we are meant to be successful in that. But we can't be successful if we're pretending we're something that we're not, or we are not living in alignment because we've negated what God actually sent us here to do and become. So, what are your initial thoughts, Katie, on identity and maybe why it's important to get clear with true or divine identity?
Sure. I think identity is a huge aspect of our lives that maybe we don't give as much credit to as we really need to, right? We live in a world where there's so many different identities, right? We're living in a world with with confusion happening all over, right? People just don't even know who they are, what gender is, what a woman is. Like, I mean, we really are in a world where things are getting really difficult to define. Right. So how important is it for us to truly be able to know in our heart and our core who we are and who we were created by God to become, right? And so I think that the world it's a really loud and confusing place. And I know living throughout my life, like you said, there's so many labels that get placed upon us, the pressure to identify and label ourselves, even when we're uncertain, right? There's just this outside pressure to just say, well, who are you? What are you? I don't know. Can't we be in a place where we're still figuring it out? Like, can we create a space that's safe enough for people to reflect and find that peace in saying, I don't know, I'm kind of on a journey right now, right? Why do I have to define exactly who I am? But that gets kind of confusing, right? And so this idea that Nikki and I have come across is, well, what if you could find your identity directly from God? Because we go to people we trust, right? We're surrounded by mentors, by teachers, by leaders, by parents, siblings, other family members, dear friends, right? They see a side of us or an image of us that they're attracted to, that they're drawn to, but it's only a portion of us. But how many times do we get labeled by that image, right? Like Nikki said, oh, I've been told my whole life, oh, you have such a beautiful smile. Wonderful. That can be a wonderful attribute, but that's not who I am. It's a piece of me, right? I know that I've had, if you go back, like let's really go back, Nikki. Like, what was childhood like for you? What were the first voices we were hearing? Were they always positive? Because I can tell you, mine weren't, right, Nikki? Like, siblings, were we kind? Did the words that came out of our mouths, were they kind to our siblings?
No.
Right? Were our siblings nice to us? Like, we just weren't. We love them dearly, right? But we don't always say the nicest things because we just aren't in that right capacity of seeing people for truly who they are and what their heart is. So Nikki, when you ask, like, where do we, I mean, I look at myself and think, okay, what labels did I have that I I owned. And I'm going to say it like that instead of my identity because they were just labels that I owned, right? And I've had labels of being judgmental. I've had labels of being too much. I'm too much. I don't fit the mold. I've had labels of being a listener, right? There's a positive. I've had labels of just that not fitting in. These are just a few, but I've actually chosen to take on the labels of an anxious and depressed person. I've chosen to take on the labels of owning my illness and allowing them to be an excuse and to try and create a false identity for me to maybe make my life a little bit easier or gain sympathy or excuses from the world. But those are not identities. Those are more of these labels I choose to hide myself or choose to hold back, or again, I don't like to use this word, Nikki, but I'm going to say manipulate situations that maybe make me more comfortable or safe, right? It's not necessarily an intention to hurt somebody with a manipulation, but in honesty, it is trying to create a protection for me, right? I
Yeah.
lived many, many years with those labels and trying to make those labels fit who I was, but that's not who I am.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you see it that way now. And I'm that you just got really vulnerable with us, just right off the bat. Just and deciding to own, to recognize that you have owned some of these, even the unpleasant ones, I think is all wrapped up in ego. It's all wrapped up in, well, maybe I don't like this label, but it's useful in this situation. Like it might help me get out of the situation I don't want to be in. Or it might actually give me more space where people aren't gonna come bug me or ask me anything, or, and I think we all do it. The sooner we realize that that's a normal human tendency and it's okay to be aware of that, and also okay to say, "You know what? I have chosen to own that in the past." I like your word choice of owning it because that's really what it is. We literally get to choose what it is we're buying into, right? The experiences we buy into, and you just got really raw and vulnerable with some of these things that that you've chosen to own, whether it's been a conscious choice or not. It's an act of free will. And so, yeah, so some of mine that are just popping off the top of my head from being a kid was distracted, silly, foolish, hyperactive, attention seeking. Those are identities that I had put on me as labels, and they hurt a lot. They actually made me mask a lot of things that now that I'm actually stepping into my real identity, realized those weren't flaws at all. That was just somebody else because of their triggers and their own baggage projected onto me. And because of that, I chose to hyper mask those symptoms. And I said, I'm not going to be these things. I'm not going to be distracted. I'm going to be hyper vigilant instead of distracted. I'm going to learn everything I can about every single subject possible so I don't come across as foolish. I'm going to da 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 da, right? I'm going to mask those because I don't want to be seen as that. So I like how both of us, we have these two different perspectives, and I'm sure we've had a combination of these two very strong realities. I don't think one person's one way and one person's the other. I think there's very much a blend of these patterns in our lives, but in neither case have these labels been helpful at navigating our path to Jesus Christ. But I will say that God is amazing and he can actually use those experiences of our past that we have over identified with something or chosen to try to push back away from those identities and mask. He's able to, no matter what our experiences, he's always able to make our past experiences unfold in a beautiful way in our future.
For sure, Nikki. I mean, and that's the thing is he gives us the grace to live our lives with our agency to choose, but he allows us to take our experiences and learn from them, right? He molds us into who we are because of where we've been. And it's that beautiful time to be able to have that rearview mirror to reflect back and see. Sometimes it's easier to see the past and where he was and how he worked with us, right? And maybe got us to the point where we are now able to submit to him, able to allow him to mold us, to bring us to where we currently are. So I don't think that even when we're stuck in these, past identities that they were mistakes by any means. Like you said, they were still unique to us because we are unique to him.
Yes, and I love how you bring that perspective that we do need to get humble. We do need to just take it before God and say, "Who am I, really? Like, who am I in all this? Am I foolish to you? Am I, defensive? Am I offensive? Whatever it is, am I really this, or is that a projection either from someone else or a label that I have identified with?" I love how you mentioned that because that is that really vulnerable space that a lot of us get really nervous about entering that space because we feel like our ego is threatened because it is, right? We can take our ego to God. He'll listen to us with our ego intact, but he usually will help us chip away at that ego until that ego is no longer there and it's just what God has for us that's left. And yeah, God's going to prune away at that. He's going to say, "Oh, sorry, this label, it's not serving you at all. We're just going to chop that branch off." And that label, or that identity that I gave you, you're actually nourishing that. Let's prune it a little bit. Let's make you a little more humble so it can grow more fruit. And that's what's going to happen. And it's not a comfortable experience. It's not a comfortable experience to say, "God, I'm coming before you. You tell me what you created me to be." Because what if God says, "Sorry, you can't be the absent-minded professor again," right? Like, what happens when God says that? What happens when God says, "Sorry, you can't be, hyper vigilant about this area of your life anymore," or this label, right? Maybe it's a really awesome label. Because I have gotten some pretty cool labels. I'll just tell you that. People have given me some amazing labels, and some of them I'm like, "I like that." And God's like, "Yeah, that's not you either." Right? So it's vulnerable for multiple reasons because it really just chips away at that ego. Yeah.
It's true, right? And it is that, but I think it's a beautiful space to be in. It's a really beautiful space when we can submit ourselves to God with that trust in Him to know that He isn't intentionally trying to make our lives uncomfortable. He never wants us to suffer, right? It's really walking into that space with faith and hope that He sees us and He loves us and He wants us to just open our eyes to the potential of really who we are, right? Being a mom really helps in this factor. I think that's what, God gave us the gift of having families and children so that we could understand that love, and we can imagine that love that we have for our children. And, my children are now young adults and teenagers. um, and so they're a little bit more independent, right? They choose. And sometimes I wish that I could just sit there and say, "Wait, child, like, why are you choosing the hard path? Why are you going this way? There's so much more if you would just listen," right? As parents, we have this wisdom because of experience that we've endured, because of love that we have that we wish that we could just pick up our children and place them properly in the right things that are going to bring him all the love and the joy and the happiness in our life. But we know through our own experiences and as parents that life doesn't come that way. And so we have a loving God that is merciful and gracious and allows us to walk our own paths. But when we do open ourselves to Him, even when we know that it might be uncomfortable, well, almost always it will be, it is always for our greater good, right? And finding these identities because we live in a world with so many expectations of, well, I know that, to go back to vulnerable, I know that I really struggled with the label of a mother. I am a mother, but I think that there's many different ways to be a mother and look and how to care for your children. And it doesn't have to be one specific way. And I put so many expectations on myself as a young mom that I just mentally wasn't capable of doing. I just didn't have it in me. And I remember beating myself up so hard because I just thought I'm just not a good mom, right? But I love my children. I love my children dearly and that's what Nikki and I want to talk about is, these expectations that the world or environments or religion or groups put upon people that make us feel less than. Those are not what comes from God, right? And
That's
it's
right.
learning how to truly come to him. And I think that's what Nick and I want to talk about next is our journey and how we've been able to get to this point where we can put those expectations aside and we can truly see ourselves in a manner in which God sees us with love and grace, but also giving us that hope and strength of knowing who we are, what our true identity is from the great creator, his words to us. That gives us the ability to say, push aside those expectations. Let's push aside those old identities. Because if there's somebody we want to trust on who really sees us completely, it should be God.
Absolutely. And he does. He sees us. And I appreciate you sharing that, opening up and being vulnerable about your path and your journey. I feel like so many mothers do go through, including me, those voices in our heads that beat us up and say, I guess you were never meant to be a good mom, or like whatever it is, right? That is so false. And anything that is demeaning is not coming from God. He's not gonna say things like that. And one thing I've learned is that oftentimes those voices in our head that tells us those lies, it's actually lies because the opposite could actually be a lot more true, that you are a good mom, and that's what God wants to be saying to you. But how often do we let God be the voice in our head that we get to talk to and speak with the most? And that's been a goal of mine too, is to say, okay, God, I want you to put into my head the words to say. And he's like, well, then you're gonna have to get rid of the old, right? You're just
Yeah.
going to have to give that up so that when those negative voices come across your head, you can identify them right away as false and they don't belong because you're going to know your identity. And it goes back to trust, right? Trusting in God. Because you're not going to take this path to discover your identity if you don't first trust that God actually has a grand plan for your life, even greater than you have in your own mind. And I think sometimes we tend to grab onto whatever we can because it makes us feel alive. But true alignment with Jesus will make you feel more alive than you've ever been in your whole life. So, really, that trust of letting go of the false so you can step into the true is like the hardest thing to do at first, but it opens up the most inner comfort, like the joy in your soul that feels like I'm comfortable in who I am because nothing can change that. It's just pure me, right? It's that pure identity that God spoke into me. So let's talk a little bit about that process, actually getting clear with the word identity, because before now, we always try to figure out who we are, right? Like, what are my gifts? What are my talents? What's unique about me that makes me special? We all want to know that, right? There's a reason that so many personality tests, people want to know all this stuff. And those things are good, and we're actually gonna be talking about things like human design and astrology in upcoming episodes, but I do wanna talk about something that it's just a way to get really personal with God and find out from Him, our identity. So, what do you wanna share first off about this, Katie?
Well, do we want to go straight to the book that helped
We
us
can.
on this
You were the
journey?
one who introduced me to the book, so I wanna kinda hear a little bit about your thoughts and, like, how you came across this book. I think that is significant.
Okay, so let's show you the book. So the book that I was led to is called Living Fearless by Jamie Winship. It's actually called Living Fearless: Exchanging the Lies of the World for the Liberating Truth of God. And so I was actually recommended this book a few months ago by a dear friend who we've had a lot of heart to hearts with and trying to figure out, just where this world is taking us and some really hard things that she was facing personally in her life. And a dear friend, passed the book along to her, and it impacted and changed her life and helped her find direction of how to move forward, especially during these trying times. And so she shared it with me. So I jumped on, and it's a thin little book. It's not very long, under 200 pages, very easy to read. And Jamie actually is I'm not even going to get this right to give him all the credit that he deserves, but he is somebody that goes about and teaches people about Jesus Christ and how impactful and bringing people to Jesus to understand. He works heavily in the Muslim community and teaching people to find their identity and teaching them about Jesus Christ. He's beautiful. I've actually had the opportunity to meet him and his wife in person and listen after I read the book. But his book is actually just kind of a step-by-step guide about teaching us the difference between, we know opposition, right? And it basically spells out that where there is love, there can't be fear. But where there is fear, there is lacking in love. And so what we want to do is live fearless, which means that we should be filled with love. And it's the concept of really confession about taking all parts of us, every fear that we have, to the Lord and confessing. That doesn't mean confessing sin. That means taking our hesitations, our struggles, our fear and moving forward, our fear and stepping into things when we're being asked to try something, or we want to stretch, we want to explore, we want to expand, and taking that fear directly to God and trusting that he will gap that fear and turn that into love because he loves us. It is basically a trade-in. You take your fear to him and he's going to up-level you and bring you back love. And so how many times in life do we stop moving or progressing forward because of fear? That fear of what's on the other side, that fear of that unknown, that fear of I'm not good enough. I know I sit in that a lot. That's a label right there. I'm not good enough. What do I have to offer? Who wants to hear from me? Well, guess what? The Lord is not telling me that, right? And so Jamie walks you in this book through confession. And so he starts with explaining the difference between fear and love. And then as we take our fears directly to God with our hearts open, he will give us the strength to then take those steps forward and show us his love. And so the concept, when you bring it into identity, right? You're like, Katie, okay, that's great. You're talking about fear and love. What does this have to do with identity? But identity is by us coming and confessing to God, bringing all of our fears to him, all of our false label, all of our expectations, everyone else's perspective of us, and really fully. And he writes it down. He gives you step by step. So you have to go get his book, but you confess and you release and let go as you identify all of these false identities. You turn them over to him, and then you open your heart up to hearing him tell you who you are. So, Nikki, that's the process. It changed my life when I went through it. I was so excited about it that I had to share it with you. I quickly said, you've got to read this book. And I've been telling all of my friends, you've got to read this book. It changes your life. It changes your
Yes.
life. So, Nikki, tell me what are your thoughts with this book?
Well, at least for the last couple decades of my life, I've known that it's really important for me to bring people to God. I'm not saying I'm the only person, but one of my things is I love to bring people to God through my communication with them, my service to them. However I can do that, however I can bring people closer to God, that's something that I love to do. And so I oftentimes, in my work with people and over the last decade that I have worked as a healer with a lowercase h, I have had the beautiful privilege of getting to the core of people, like getting to the core, like what are the core beliefs? What are the core emotions that are actually wreaking havoc on the nervous system, on the body in general, causing autoimmune, whatever. I've had those experiences for the last decade. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the results that happen when people give up what's not true to them. Right. And so without saying the word identity, I was doing identity related work. And so then when you brought me the book or you recommended the book and you said, okay, you got to read this book. This is amazing. It will help you live fearless. Well, how many of us live completely without fear in our lives? Like you don't have a single thing yet you're not scared of, right? I don't know anybody who they're at least not that I talk to on a regular basis on this planet, who doesn't have a fear about something, right? So, me always wanting to improve and do better with bringing people to Christ, with the work that I do, healing work, or just, as a disciple and a friend of Jesus Christ, I was like, okay, yeah, I think that book could help me out. So I went ahead and I actually got the audiobook because I'm kind of a a distracted reader, especially with kids running around. It's easier for me to be like, okay, I'm going to be in the car for 10 minutes. I can listen for 10 minutes. Or I'm making dinner. I can listen for 45 minutes while I'm making dinner. So I actually got the audiobook and Katie made sure I knew. And so I'm telling you right off the bat, you are going to have to pause it and actually do work throughout it. You can't just listen through it and just be like, okay, I'm good. No, you actually have to do the work. Katie talks about confessing, and I really like that terminology because you're confessing not your like what makes you imperfect, but you're confessing all the things you have fears about or the ways you feel lack. And the beautiful thing is that if God can't fill your lack, if you don't first come to him with your weakness, like you have to come to Christ with your weakness in order for him to do anything for it. You can't just like shove it down and pretend it doesn't exist and expect God to do something with it. You actually have to bring it forward. And I actually, when we talk about sin, I like the Eastern religion interpretation of sin, which is lack. Sin is lack. It's
Mm.
anything where you're lacking, lacking in wisdom, lacking in strength, lacking in free will, whatever it is. And so I kind of take that in those terms. I'm going to take those sins or those lacks to God. So I had that opportunity where I wrote down, all of my false identities. There's a part in the book where it's like, okay, write down all the things. And so I'm writing them all down. And some of them are actually kind of cool, but I was like, that's obviously a label. And I just wrote down all the ones. Most of them are false. Most of them are ones that make me feel weak. And so I wrote them down. I wrote down like it was like a whole page and really getting clear with that. That's the first thing because it's a way to identify what isn't the belief. And then you can actually, it's just like weeding a garden. You pull out all the weeds. Well, now you can plant something, or now you can nourish a seed that has been planted without it getting choked up. So that was kind of my beginning process. And right off the bat, I was noticing a change. We're literally clearing what is not true to a person so the true can shine. And that person in this experience was me. And so it was just such a beautiful experience for me. And I don't know how much you want me to go into all the details about this journey, but that's just like gives you a little flavor of the beginning of how why I first decided, okay, I'm going to jump into it, and then getting to that part in there about clearing the false identities. So it's always really important to do that first to clear those limiting identities because on the other side, that's when it really starts becoming enough to change your life.
It's true. Thank you. Thank you, Nikki, for sharing that. Yeah, I can relate. I know for me, I've been on a healing journey for at least the last 10 years, if not more, and I come with a lot of wounding. And so the book for me was a great place for me to truly come to weeding out my mind, other people's projections. I like that word that we use that one a lot in the way that Nikki and I talk, that they projected on me that I allowed. I really did allow myself to s to take those on as identities. They were my wounding comes from people I trusted, people that, I cared about, and later found that maybe by no fault of their own, they just didn't fully have the capacity and capability to see me for who I really am and the gifts that God gave me because our gifts are different and we see people through our own wounds, our own trauma, and sometimes we just aren't capable quite seeing people for who they truly are. And so on my healing journey, it's been able to come to peace with that, to understand that, to have love in my heart, forgiveness, but then also to have that love for myself to say it's okay, but I'm going to step into to really being on this journey with God, walking with him and allowing him to help me become who he wants me to be. So I did the same exercises with Nikki. Like I said, this is like she mentioned, this is a short book, but it is a workbook. It takes time and effort and you get what you put into the book, really and truly. And it's okay to be at different levels. I actually have done these exercises twice because it's a little bit foreign. And so I played with the idea and I kind of experimented on it for a minute. And then I was unsure. And so then I experimented again and I had a little bit more clarity. And the Lord is gracious. He is so gracious and mindful, and he meets us where we are. And so for you as an audience, just remember that. That's why I have it in paper. I'm a total reader. Like I had to sit down and like reread a little bit more slow in the understanding sometimes. And so I have it highlighted. I have it so I can flip back to specific passages to help me because this is an important thing. Um, and and I now know some of my identities, and I will say some because as we continue to journey, we stretch and we grow, and the Lord blesses us with so much more. And so I took my list and I burned it. I know Nikki kept her list of all her faults so that she would remember and she'd be able to look back. So she's got it all written. And for me, the process was to burn it. And I burned it on a full moon and let it truly go. That it no longer has a space for me. So Nikki, if you are willing to share what feels comfortable for you on an identity that you found that God showed you, and then how that has changed your perspective of yourself or how you are addressing life or people.
Yeah, well, I'm totally happy to share. I think it was a fascinating journey for me, and I think it is fascinating for people who I do share it with because when I got to the point I cleared all the false identities and got ready for the true identity. The prayer that he puts in that book right before you step into the presence of God and just say, "Hey, I'm ready to hear what you have to say about me." That's a beautiful prayer. Like I literally felt like demons couldn't stand in the presence of that, which was really good because before that, I don't know, my mood was kind of irritable and cranky. And I'm sure it was the adversary saying, I don't want you to know this stuff. This is good stuff. Like, I don't want any of that. That's going to ruin all the force that I have on you. Right.
Right. Well, and Nikki,
And
real quick, like let's just take a moment there. So the beauty of the way that Jamie has written it is that you don't need to know how to pray. You don't need to know what to pray for, but he walks you through the steps of you read it or you in maybe in Nikki's path, you open your mind to saying as he's saying it that you are saying amen and that you are receiving it. So the beauty of the book is it's all written out there for you. You just follow along and open yourself to receive, and you will be blessed with it. So, okay, Nikki, go on.
yeah, so after that, I actually felt super calm and peaceful and open-minded, and I was like, "Okay, God, what do you have? What do you have for me? What is your identity for me?" And here I am, like, if I was fortunately open in this space, but like deep down in that egocentric part of my mind, I'm like, "I want you to give me something like cool and epic and like bit larger than life, like identity. Give me just like lay it on me, right?" And and God says, "You are my caregiver." And I'm like, "Hold on. Hold on. I do not like that, not one bit. I have learned to set good boundaries in my life. I do not wanna be labeled as a caregiver. I want to be out there and changing lives and doing that. Don't you put me into this box." And anyway, I actually had threw a fit. I was about ready to just say, "I'm done with this. I don't wanna listen to this anymore." You know, my pride was getting in the way a little bit. The demons, I'm sure, were like, "Yeah, yeah, you don't like that, right? Remember how you don't like the word caregiver?" Right? And so but I sat with it for a minute. I'm like, "I'm not just gonna throw out every good thing that I've received so far because I'm having a hard time with this part." And I said, "God, why? Like, you could have given me anything. Why'd you give me that lame one?" Right? And God said, "Do you wanna know my definition of that identity?" I was like, "Okay. Go ahead and tell me. What do you mean by that you made me to be your caregiver?" And he said, "I made you to care for people because as you care for people and love them, miracles pour out of heaven for you and for them." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that was humbling, right? Because I went from being like, I don't want to be labeled like that, like really understanding that God doesn't use our language the way that we do. He doesn't put labels on and say that word is automatically bad and that word is automatically good. That profession is automatically the worst, right? He didn't say that. He just basically said your power comes in this identity when you care for and you love people, miracles pour out of heaven. That was beautiful. And when I actually rooted into that, I was like, "Oh, that's why in my career, every time I've done something in pure love, amazing things have happened." And anytime I did it because I was selfish or a little bit greedy or a little bit, what can I get out of this? It hasn't worked out as well. Like people just leave. People just walk out of my life when it was the best thing ever. And I realized that as I have shown up in the identity without even knowing that was my identity, just showing up in that space, I have been successful. And I'm like, who doesn't want to be successful, right? Like we are programmed, like I said, with that little acorn seed. We are programmed to be successful. But when we're pretending we're a corn kernel planted in the ground and hoping to grow up and be that mighty oak, we're gonna see things so wrong, right? We're gonna see, oh, well, why can't I be like this? Look, I'm growing bigger than a corn stalk. I'm not gonna be able to produce fruit. And God's like, no, I programmed you to be an oak. What are you doing stopping here at this corn stalk, right? And so but because we're programmed for success, it's really important for us to lean into those identities so that we can be successful because we're not going to be successful when we're resisting the very thing that God made us to be. And underlying that identity, God gave me several others, including hope bringer, torch bearer, and a seeker of the mysteries of God. And those are beautiful. And they explain so much why I like to uncover things that, that other people just shy away from, why I want to get to the core of things. I want to understand how God works. I want to understand these mysteries. I want to bring hope. I want to share that torch of God's love. And all of those were to support me as primarily the identity of caregiver that Jesus Christ has given me. So it's powerful when you actually lean into it. You'll start to see those patterns in your life. When I stepped into this, even without knowing that was my identity, amazing things happened. Why? Because you're programmed for success. And this is one way to just shortcut that and stop. You don't have to learn things the hard way your whole life and get battered and defeated by the world and get to this point where you hit rock bottom. Hopefully, you don't have to hit rock bottom before you get to this point. Hopefully, you can proactively get to this point so that you can just live in joy. Because ever since I've leaned into this, if I have a goal or I have a desire, then I run it past this identity. I say, where does this fit in my identity? Does it work? Is this selfish? Because if it's selfish, it's not going to fly. Like nothing selfish is related to this identity. I'll tell you that. Like I can't be selfish and be successful here. And so I run it by this and I say, okay, how is this going to fulfill these identities? And then my prayers have become from this identity you gave me, will you give me the power to do this, which will magnify that gift into the world? That has been how my prayers have changed. And that has been such a beautiful way to manifest God's power in my life because I'm working in partnership with him, not against him. Because if all those prayers that I prayed for that were contrary to this identity, why were they not answered? Because they were actually opposite to this God's plan for me, right? So anyway, that's a little bit and a lot about how things have changed since I actually had that experience and stepped into that.
I love that. Thank you, Nikki. When I love how when you were talking, even though you had that immediate like, no, it can't be that, but that you didn't give up, that you kept talking with God and saying, okay, explain this a little bit more, right? But as you were talking, what stood out to me was you were already aware of these traits, right? And you were already using these traits and that you already had in your life, but this identity gave you more power in knowing that you were in alignment with God and stepping into it, right? And that's what I think is an interesting thing is when we really go to God with that, seeking who we are, we're going to find that we actually know it deep in our heart, right? That we've seen glimpses of it, and to me, this just gives us permission, or at least for myself, permission to fully step into it and embrace that as the core of who I am, because it's so busy and loud all around, and there were so many to start with, and so then coming in, it's that same thing, and I love how Nikki, you say that you align your prayers and asking the Lord to help you basically glorify this identity in his name, right? And to lead you and guide you so that you can continue to be his vessel using that identity, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Nikki is very well in tuned with the Spirit, and she has proficient, experience in conversing with the Lord and receiving revelation, and so to listen to her experience is beautiful and uplifting. But I want to just caveat that don't be intimidated by the message that Nikki had, because the Lord will speak to us on our level and where we are. I say that with all love in my heart for Nikki, but I struggled in some of these things on my journey because again, these expectations, right, that are in my head that oh, I'm not good enough and I'm not gonna what if my answers aren't the same? What if I don't get as much detail or as expounded upon? What if the Lord doesn't talk to me that way? And I just want to reassure you that the Lord speaks to you exactly how you need. He knows each of us individually, and so the way that he speaks to me is different than the way he speaks to Nikki, and it's probably going to be different the way he speaks to you, but he does speak to you, and it's knowing and understanding and being open to allowing him to speak and hearing him, and then trusting in that. So one of my identities was a seeker of truth and light. And I have, again, always known and I have always been drawn to truth. I strive to be an honest person in all that I do, and I detest, and I will say it that way, I detest lies. I detest fake. And again, not for, I understand the protection level of how things are that we project out images or the ability to hide ourselves, so to speak, right, for safety and security. And I've always struggled with that. Meaning myself hiding. I'm not very good at masking. My face is an expressive face. Maybe it doesn't even come across so well on this podcast because I'm so serious all the time, but my face doesn't hide things well. I show my emotions. And so that to me is a part of just that seeking that truth is, with that being seeker of truth and light, it really stands out to me about authenticity, about being true to ourselves and allowing ourselves to come forward in that truth. It's a very vulnerable space to be. Vulnerability, honesty, authenticity. Those are words that I hold very true and close to my heart because they mean so much to me. And it seems at times it's hard to live true to that in this world, and especially with a lot of expectations that are surrounded, right? That perfect image or the image to be accepted, and I just never fit. I just never fit. So I am who I am. And reading and understanding these identities and understanding that I seek out that truth and that light has helped the Lord show me my light. And I'm still on a journey of finding that light within, but He's been guiding me to share that light. So not only am I to seek, but He's also told me another identity is I am a gatherer. And so here I sit crying with Nikki, totally stepping out of my comfort zone to start a podcast, to share and to create a space with Nikki and I together with our identities that God has shown us, that we can be a place where people can gather, where we can be true and authentic, where we can care for each other, where we can bring hope in a world that's a little loud and crazy. And so hopefully this is a safe place for you to land. And in finishing up Jamie's book, the beauty of it is that not only does he help you learn and walk through finding your identity, but he teaches you how to stay in constant communication with the Lord on a daily, to come to him daily with simple questions of what is it, Lord, that you want me to do today? What is it now that I know who I am? What am I supposed to take into the world? And show me individually and uniquely how to bring that identity forward. And it's a beautiful book and it's a beautiful experience. That's, on all of my tears. What you get out of it when you come truly and you open your heart to the experience, you will not be disappointed.
Uh, I would say even just giving up the false identities was amazing, right? And then you get these brand new ones and you're like, now I can frame and shape my life around this so that I can be successful in these identities in partnership with Jesus Christ instead of, feeling like I'm running into the wall every left turn and I don't know why. And like, because didn't program you to be a corn kernel, right? So, thank you so much, Katie, for sharing. And thank you for sharing this book with me to begin with, and then sharing this journey with me as we walk this path. And Katie and I have both seen a lot of things, in my profession, working with hundreds and hundreds of individuals. I've seen so many different things related to helping people navigate toward Jesus Christ and point their horizons toward Jesus Christ. And Katie, with all of her experience, she has a lot of experience, a lot of trial and error, a lot of seeing things in a way that other people don't always see. And even having experiences that, sometimes she'll explain to me different experiences and I'm like, you did that. You went through that. You like this is your normal? She's just amazing. And so it's just really, really neat to have this podcast. Yes, like you said, Katie, and to be able to share this wisdom and not just share, but also walk in hand with these amazing people who are listening and saying, it's going to be okay because we've got Jesus first of all, and we've got each other. It's going to be okay. Like,
So
because
true.
Jesus is with us, He's our hope. Where else are we going to turn? He really is life eternal. So, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And Katie, thank you so much for being vulnerable, real, and raw with us today, for sharing your beautiful messages through your words and your tears. And I think you are just such a gift. I'm so grateful to do this with you. So
Thank you,
we
Nikki.
hope we hope that you join us next time on our next episode.